Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 40 of Willow Cove Crafts. Hello and welcome to Willow Cove Crafts, my channel here on YouTube where I talk about knitting and sewing and my other crafty endeavors. My name is Emily and today is episode 40. I will be going over everything I worked on over the last several weeks. I think it's been about a month since I've done a project update. So we have some exciting things to talk about today. Today I have 2 finished objects and 2 works in progress to share with you. The first of which is what I am wearing, and it's a really exciting one. So a couple weeks ago I finished up the Culm Pullover by Fiona. I will put in a little bit of video of me wearing it. I'm so happy with how it turned out. It's this beautiful dropped shoulder sweater. It's kind of a sweatshirt shape. I find the shape really kind of classic and vintage. There's something about it, just the dropped shoulder and the cropped waist just kind of makes me feel like I should be in like a 50s movie. I don't know, but for those of you who have been watching for a while, you will know that I have been complaining about this sweater for months because I am trying to be a little bit more monogamous in my making, and I started this sweater, I want to say like right around Halloween, like if not on Halloween, a day or 2 before, so end of October, and I worked on this sweater monogamously for about 2.5 months. I finished it, I think the second week in January, and I did a little sewing here and there in between, but other than that, this was what I worked on, and it took me 2.5 months of knitting to finish. And I think that comes down to several different reasons. The first is that it is a fingering weight sweater, so it is knit at a really fine gauge. And then the other reason is that it is this all over moss stitch. So pretty much the entire sweater is knit in some sort of knit purl pattern. So it's moss stitch. There's this panel down the front. Let's see if you can kind of see. It's got this twisted rib panel down the front, which adds a little bit of cool visual interest, but it is still this knit purl pattern. And so moss stitch is really slow for me because you're toggling back and forth between knits and purls. That mixed with the fingering weight yarn, this sweater just felt like it took forever, but it is done. I'm so happy with it. It feels just like so fancy. Like, I feel like this is the most professional looking garment I've ever made. It looks like I bought it from the store, which I know is not a necessity for our hand knit things, but it is nice to have made something and really spent a lot of time and careful care towards the sweater and just have it turn out completely beautiful. I'm really, really happy with how it turned out. The yarn I used, I had 1 extra skein. So in total, I used, I want to say 6.5 skeins. So I bought 8 skeins and I had 1 completely left over, and then I have a significant portion of a second one left over. So I used the Kinross 4-ply by Wee County Yarns in the colorway Mary. This is a 100% lamb's wool, again, fingering weight. And this yarn is really, really special. it's pretty amazing. So something to note about this yarn is that it does have a lot of spinning oil in it. So knitting with it can feel a little crunchy because it's got so much oil in it. And then once you wash it and all of that oil comes out, I think I had to wash this 2 or 3 times before the water ran clear. It was just, the water was so dirty and so like grimy. So I just like kept washing it until it ran clear, which was like 2 or 3 washes. But once I got all of that spinning oil out, it softened up so dramatically. It feels really, really nice. I've heard some people say that they think it feels like cashmere, which I don't know if I would go that far, to be honest, but it is really soft and it is a really, really nice wool. I have another sweater quantity of this yarn in a light pink color, and I'm really looking forward to knitting with it again someday. But I really recommend this yarn. It's so nice. Just be prepared for a little bit of a crunchy knitting experience, but that will all come out in the wash and you'll be left with something really, really special. And yeah, like I said, I have a leftover skein, more than one leftover skein. I think that's enough to maybe like make a hat or something. Could always use a nice red hat. And yeah, this color is just perfect. It's like the most perfect kind of cool red. Oh, I love it. What else to say about this? A couple modifications that I made. So the sweater is intended to be a little bit more oversized. If you look at some of the pattern pictures, I think the sweaters on the models in the pattern pictures theirs are just a little bit more oversized than mine. I did not knit mine with as much ease as was called for in the pattern. I believe I made the 3rd size, which comes out to about a 50-inch sweater circumference. So my bust is about 46 inches. So that gave me, you know, about 3 to 4 inches of positive ease. And the sweater I think calls for more than that. I want to say 8, but I'm not sure. Definitely more than what I knit. The reason I did that is I went off of the yardage called for in the pattern. I knit the size that corresponded with the amount of yarn I had. And I probably could have sized up. I definitely ended up having enough yarn for that, but just so you're aware, if you get gauge with this pattern, you can probably stretch your yarn a little bit further. I definitely could have sized up and had plenty of yarn to knit the 4th size to get a little bit more of a looser fit. But all in all, I am still really happy with the fit. I didn't lengthen it at all. Typically, I will lengthen things. I kept this one as it is. It is knit bottom up, and I find with bottom up sweaters, it's a little bit harder to gauge how long it should be because you can't really try it on until it's too late and you can't lengthen it anymore. So I did just knit it to pattern. I kind of compared it to a couple other sweaters I had. It is a bit more cropped on me, but again, I'm completely fine with that. I feel like a more cropped, more fitted sweater in this pattern does make for a bit more of a like vintage feeling sweater. I feel like I should wear this with a poodle skirt or something. It just feels like very 50s to me. What else? The other big modification I made was the original sweater has a split in the hem on the back, right in the middle, center back. And I've talked about this before in a previous episode, but I really hate that pattern detail. I'm sorry if that upsets anyone. I've seen it in a couple patterns and I just like don't get it. It's just this like split right in the middle, and I do think it like what are we trying to emphasize? Our butt cracks? Like honestly, like why would we put a split right in the middle of the back? I don't know. I don't get it. Again, if you like it, I'm so happy for you. It's not something that I like. So I omitted the split, which was pretty easy. To make the split, you knit the hem back and forth. So I just, you know, knit in the round and kind of modified the instructions to be in the round. And I just got rid of that split because it is not my style. So yes, really happy with how this sweater turned out. It definitely was a labor of love. If you're thinking about knitting one, just be prepared for it to take a while, but it was definitely worth it. I feel like I'm gonna get a ton of wear out of this one. Fun fact about me that I am seeing in this camera view really nicely. So I have, since I was a kid, had, I think it's called like a myelin streak. It's basically a streak of gray hair. And when I wear my hair half up, I feel like it just is really on display. Yeah, since I was a little child, I've always had a streak of silver in my hair. So if you ever noticed that, I think it's pretty neat. My second finished object today is a sewing project. I actually have a sewing vlog up, kind of outlining my whole process in making this. So if you are interested at all, you should go check that video out. But I sewed this sweatshirt. This is the Toaster Sweater by Sew House 7 Patterns. That sweatshirt comes in 2 versions. So this is version 1. It's got my cute little Willow Cove Crafts tag in it. And I sewed this out of a Waffle knit fabric that I got off of Etsy. I believe the shop is called Say Stitches Fabric. And yes, just kind of an inexpensive polyester fabric. I'm still a new sewist, a new garment sewist, so I get a little nervous to use really nice fabric just because it feels like so much more high stakes than knitting. Like in knitting, if you mess up, you can just rip it out and you can reuse the yarn. In sewing, that is not necessarily the case. You cut your fabric and you're done. There's no uncutting it. If your sewing machine eats your fabric and like really frays the edge, sometimes that is not salvageable, and it just really makes me nervous sometimes, but I'm getting better. I'm getting a little more confident. But anyways, this came together really quickly. I sewed this in less than a day. I did prep my pattern ahead of time, but once I, you know, cut my fabric and assembled it, it came together in a couple of hours, which is a really exciting part about sewing. You can just, I mean, when you knit a sweater, it can take 2.5 months. Like this red sweater, and then if you sew a sweater, it comes together like that. So yep, really fun, really happy with it. I am still kind of getting used to sewing with stretch fabric, and whenever my stretch fabric projects come out, it feels like magic. Because sewing with stretch fabric is supposed to be tricky, but I have not found it to be so. If you've got the right tools, I think it has been going pretty smoothly. So again, that's the Toaster Sweater by Sew House 7 Patterns. I have plans to make a couple more versions of this sweatshirt at some point. Probably not anytime soon because I have started a new kind of larger sewing project, and I think by the time I finish that, it's gonna be getting warmer out. So maybe this next fall and winter, I'll make a few more versions of this. All right, moving along to works in progress. I am trying to be a bit more of a monogamous knitter these days. So I think in the coming months, that's kind of what you'll see. I'll probably be working on one knitting project at a time. I have found that it's done a lot to like clear out a lot of mental clutter. I've talked about this before, but when I have too many projects on the go, it like takes up a lot of mental energy to decide what I want to work on in an evening, or to decide a good balance between the projects. And am I working on this one enough? Am I working on this one too little? And working on one thing takes care of all of that. I know exactly what I'm going to work on a given day. And when you work on one thing, it goes by pretty quickly. If I had not worked on this red sweater monogamously, it would have taken me a year, and I might have abandoned it. If you've been watching for a while, you know that I love to start projects and not finish them. So yes, I think I might be a monogamous knitter now. Now that I've done, I feel like this sweater was like the test. The fact that I was able to get through this slog of a sweater and be monogamous about it, I think this is just how it's gonna be from now on. I don't know. But I do have one knitting work in progress and one sewing work in progress, and I think that's a pretty good balance, you know. Sew once or twice a week and then knit the rest of the time, and that is, I think, how I'm gonna be spending my crafting time these days. So anyways, I finished my Culm pullover and I needed a new project. So I hemmed and hawed for a little bit about what I wanted to work on. I was really in the mood to cast on something new. I do think when I finish this sweater, I will go back to an old project. I have had my whip series in December and January where I went through all of my unfinished works in progress. I do want to get back to those, and I do think after I finish this, I will be pivoting to some of those old projects, but I was just really in the mood to cast on something new, so that's what I did. So let me hold this up. I have started the Ingrid Sweater by PetiteKnit, and it is a drop shoulder sweater with these horizontal bands of textured panels, I guess you would call it. And how the construction of this sweater works is you start by knitting the back. So you start at the neck and you work some short rows to shape the shoulders, and then you knit down through the ribbed section. So you've got this moss stitch texture. There's eyelets in between every section, and then there's this faux cable. That's something to call out, is if you've seen this sweater, it's a pretty popular pattern, but if you've seen this sweater and are intimidated by the cabling, this is not a real cable. It's fake. It's a different technique. So don't let that intimidate you. So we have the faux cable, and then there is a ribbed section. So you knit down to kind of make the armhole, and then you pick up stitches along the shoulder to do the same for the front. And then just yesterday, I joined the front and back to make the sleeve holes. And now I am knitting in the round to knit the body. So this is a really fun pattern. I find that the different panels of stitches are very like potato chippy. Like you just want to get to the end of that section and then you get to do something new for a while. By the time I'm starting to get tired of a certain section, the next one is coming up. So it's really a very interesting and engaging knit. So I'm having a lot of fun with that one. The yarn I am using is So the original pattern calls for a DK weight held with a mohair. I really wanted to use my stash, and I didn't have a good DK weight on hand that I wanted. I mean, I have plenty of DK weight yarn. It's all kind of allotted for something. So when I buy yarn, I tend to have a certain pattern in mind. And sometimes I change my mind on things, but most of the time, if I bought the yarn for something, it's because I really want to make it. And I have a few sweater quantities in my stash that are not allotted for anything in particular. And so, yes, I really wanted to knit this sweater, but I hadn't bought yarn for it. So I was kind of looking through that collection of unallotted yarn, and I decided, because I didn't have a DK weight that I thought would be good, to use a cone of Holst Supersoft. And this is a fingering weight yarn, but if you hold it double, then it makes a DK. So I am holding 2 strands of this. This is in the colorway Almond, which is just a nice warm, really light beige. And then I am holding that together with a strand of Knitting for Olive soft silk mohair in the colorway Mushroom Rose. I had originally bought this to pair with a different yarn, and then it was not a good match when it arrived. So I also kind of had this sitting around with nothing specific, but then when I put them together, I thought those were a pretty good match. So yes, I'm, having a lot of fun knitting this sweater, but I'm also really happy that I found some yarn in my stash that was not really meant for anything that I was able to pair together to knit this. So yes, I am a little nervous I'm gonna run out of yarn. I should have enough based on the yardage in the pattern. I, took the yardage in the pattern and doubled it, and there's more yarn on one of these cones, but I'm still a bit nervous. This is over half, but I don't know. It should be fine, but doubling up a cone, I am always just like a little nervous that I'm gonna run out, even though I should be fine. I should be fine. The numbers kind of check out. So, anywho, having a lot of fun with this one, and I'm excited to keep knitting on it, and hopefully, because it's my only knitting project, I will have a lot of progress to show you the next time I record. I forgot to mention that the Holst Supersoft that I'm using for my Ingrid sweater is a 100% wool, and it is another one of those yarns that has a lot of spinning oil left in it. If you're not familiar, Holst is pretty inexpensive, and part of the reason they're able to make it so inexpensive is that they cut out a lot of the processing that happens. So a lot of yarn gets washed a couple times while it's in the factory so that it's nice and fluffy and clean when it comes to you. The Holst, they cut out some of the washing, so it has a lot of spinning oil in it, but once you wash it, all of that oil comes out and it's really nice and fluffy. It is more of a rustic yarn, but the washed fabric is really nice, very similar to the Wee County yarns. You just gotta wash it, but it is a little crunchy and sticky to work with. Not sticky. The spinning oil makes it kind of tacky, like it just kind of like clings to itself, and it does make it a bit crunchy. So if you feel it and you're like, what the heck is going on here? It does have a lot of oil in it. It will wash out, and it's one of my favorite yarns. I really, really like it, but you have to kind of know what you're getting into. All right, my last work in progress, like I mentioned, is a new sewing project. I'm I'm gonna have a hard time showing this one to you, but because it's winter time, I always get like a really strong urge in the winter time to quilt. And yes, I know I have a lot of quilts going on, but I wanted to start a new one, so I did. I haven't gotten very far. I've put about 1 evening of work into this week, which basically means I've just been cutting fabric. But the pattern I am making is the Inner Beauty quilt by Southern Charm Quilts. I love Southern Charm Quilts. I cannot get enough of Southern Charm Quilts. Melanie is the designer behind Southern Charm, and I think her quilt patterns are so stunning and unique, and I just really love everything she produces. So this pattern came out late last year and I was immediately in love with it. So her inspiration for this quilt, so quilts with just like these kind of diagonal squares, like it's a square, a diamond, I guess, and it's made up of all these little squares. That is a traditional quilt, I believe, called like a trip around the world or around the world or something like that. Quilters out there will know what I'm talking about. But Melanie's inspiration was to kind of blow that up a bit and to make her different diagonals other classic quilt blocks. So yeah, it is a sampler quilt, and again, I think she's so creative. A lot of sampler quilts I've seen are very modular, like here's a section with this block and here's a section with this other block, but she has really created something here that's very cohesive while also giving you the opportunity to practice a bunch of fun new types of quilt blocks. So this is the back. You can maybe see a little bit better on this schematic how, you know, she's got some plain squares in there, but then a lot of the squares are different types of quilt blocks. So I saw this schematic and was really inspired by the colors. It is just like a drawing of the quilt, but I loved the colors in like the key over here and then in the schematic. And so what I decided to do was to try and replicate this color palette in my quilt. So I am using all Kona cotton solids in mine. It's not an exact match, but I did try to get fabrics that mimicked the colors in the key. And I did just start cutting, and I don't want to tilt this and spill it, but you can kind of see I've got this tray and I've been cutting my fabric and trying to stay organized. Because there's so many different types of quilt blocks in this quilt, there is a lot of cutting. Every fabric has to get cut a different way. There's 12 different colors, I believe. So every fabric gets cut slightly differently, and the cutting instructions are pretty intense. And she says this in the pattern, but staying organized is really important because there's a lot going on. It's not hard, but it is a little bit, I don't want to say complex. I don't want to say tedious because tedious sounds negative, but there's just a lot to keep track of. And, you know, if you've got fabrics that are similar, like some of my fabrics look very similar, like I do have this kind of color gradient going on. It can get really easy to mix up your fabrics or, you know, not cut the right shapes. And so I'm trying really hard to stay organized and to keep everything straight. So I have so far cut 5 of my 12 fabrics, and I'm really hoping today, this evening, after I edit and upload this episode, I can maybe finish cutting the rest of my fabric and start sewing. That would be really exciting. I do really like to get all of my fabric cut before I start sewing because cutting fabric's not my favorite part of the quilting process, and I like to just get it done. And normally, like, I can cut out a quilt. I mean, it depends on how complicated the quilt is, but like in the past, I've spent a couple hours and the fabric's cut. This one, because there's so much cutting that's going on, it's taken me a while to cut out the fabric, but I know that I will really thank myself when everything is cut and I just get to sit and enjoy the sewing process. So yes, really excited about this. I'm excited to see it all come together and to kind of make that schematic into an actual real life quilt. Really excited. And that is everything I have to share with you today. So I am gonna plan on filming another project update in about 2 weeks. Between now and then, I'm just gonna put some work in on my Ingrid sweater and my Inner Beauty quilt. I don't think I'll finish either of those in the next 2 weeks. However, I am hoping for some significant progress. So if you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up, leave it a comment. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to be notified of my future videos. Again, I love hearing from you all. It really, really warms my heart whenever you all leave me comments or likes. It makes me feel really good. And yes, thank you so much for watching and spending a little bit of your day with me, and I will chat with you all in a few weeks. Bye, everyone.